Hey guys, tonight we're going to trace a story that begins not with a roar, but with a silent footstep in the darkness. We're traveling back 12,000 years to witness the beginning of one of the most curious and unlikely partnerships in the history of this planet. The story of how a wild, solitary killer chose to move in with us. Imagine, you are standing on a ridge in the Fertile Crescent, the land that would one day be called the cradle of civilization. The last whispers of the Ice Age are finally fading from the air. Before you lies a vast, rolling landscape of grasslands and sparse woodlands, bathed in the silver light of a prehistoric moon. The air is cool and smells of damp earth, wild barley, and something else. Something alive. This world feels utterly ancient and untamed, a place where your own ancestors are just one of many creatures trying to survive the night. But down in the tall grass, something is moving. It's not a mammoth, not a saber-toothed cat, but something much smaller, much subtler. There, slipping between the rocks, is a cat. At a glance, it looks familiar. The same pointed ears, the same long, balancing tail, the same graceful, liquid movement of a cat you might see in a garden today. But look closer. This is no house cat. This is Felis silvestris lybica, the Near Eastern wildcat, the ancestor of every single purring, sleeping, judgmental cat on Earth. And in its yellow eyes, there is no hint of affection for you or your kind. There is only a cool, calculating, and perfect self-sufficiency. Over the next 10,000 years, this formidable little hunter will go on an impossible journey. It will watch as the humans in this valley create a world-changing invention that will lure it from the wilderness. It will strike an unspoken bargain that benefits both species, spreading from this one small corner of the world to conquer every continent alongside humanity. It will be worshipped as a god in one empire and condemned as a demon in another, all before finally finding its way to the foot of your bed. So how did it happen? How did this wild and untamable spirit become our companion? Did we truly tame it? Or is the truth far more complicated? Tonight, thanks to new genetic and archaeological discoveries, we will venture into the deep past to find the answers and witness the moment this incredible partnership began. Frankly, if you tried to scoop this cat up for a cuddle, you wouldn't get a purr. You'd be lucky to get away with all your fingers. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. That small click sends a big signal to the algorithm. That long-form, serious educational content still matters. And to me, it's an incredibly meaningful show of support. Thank you so much for helping keep this channel going strong. It always fascinates me to see where you're all tuning in from. Let me know in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes adjust to the darkness as you follow the wildcat. You are now seeing the world from its perspective. Your hearing is a superpower. You can hear the almost imperceptible rustle of a gerbil twitching its nose 20 yards away. Your sense of smell paints a rich picture. The mineral tang of the rocks, the sweet perfume of the acacia trees, the musky trail of a fox that passed this way an hour ago. Every sense is tuned for survival in this crepuscular world, the world of twilight, dawn, and dusk. This animal is a master of the in-between times. It is a creature of profound solitude. Unlike the wolves that sometimes howl in the distance, it has no pack. It relies on no one. Its territory, marked with scent, is its kingdom, and it is a jealous ruler. Survival is a solitary affair, a silent and deadly game of chess played every single night. The only social obligations are to find a mate in the spring and to raise the next generation of perfect hunters, who are then sent off to find their own patch of wilderness. This is the crucial difference, the reason its story is so unlike that of the dog. There was no pack hierarchy for early humans to infiltrate, no alpha to replace. This animal's spirit was entirely its own. You watch as it freezes, its body low to the ground. Its coat, a pattern of sandy beige broken by thin, dark stripes, makes it all but invisible. This is the mackerel tabby pattern, the default camouflage for this species. Scientists call it cryptic coloration, a pattern evolved over millions of years to break up the body's outline, to mimic the play of light and shadow in tall grass. It's so effective that the gerbil never knows the cat is there until the final, silent rush. This is what it was born to do. As it settles down to consume its meal, it has no idea that the world around it is about to change forever. On the horizon, the flicker of a human campfire is a portent of a new era. For now, the cat watches it with cautious indifference. That strange, loud, two-legged ape is a creature to be avoided. But soon, very soon, it will make the wildcat an offer it can't refuse. You pull your focus back from the wildcat, letting your perspective drift upwards like a drone climbing into the night sky. Below you, the Fertile Crescent is just a small patch in a much larger, wilder world. This is the planet as it was at the tail end of the late Pleistocene, a world that feels both alien and strangely familiar. It's a land of giants. In the distance, you can just make out the silhouettes of a herd of woolly mammoths, their huge curved tusks gleaming in the moonlight. Somewhere in the darker woods, a saber-toothed cat, a smilodon, sharpens its terrifying dagger-like canines on the bark of a tree. Packs of dire wolves, larger and more robust than any wolf you know, patrol the plains. This is a world of megafauna, a world of ice and fire, and it is passing away. The very air around you is uncertain. The great ice sheets that once covered half of Europe and North America are in retreat. But their departure is not a gentle one. The climate is in a state of chaotic flux. For a few centuries, the world gets warmer, the grasslands spread, and life flourishes. Then, without warning, the cold comes snapping back. You're now witnessing a period scientists call the Younger Dryas, a brief but brutal return to near glacial conditions. It's as if the planet's thermostat is broken. The forests shrink, the grasslands wither, and a sudden, intense pressure is put on every living thing to adapt or die. This cold snap is a global event, and it is a crucible that will forge the future. Down below, you see the flicker of another campfire. These are the humans who share this volatile landscape. They are a species on the brink, just like everyone else. You watch a small band of them, maybe 30 individuals, huddled together for warmth. They are hunter-gatherers, their entire existence dictated by the movement of animals and the seasonal availability of plants. They live in a state of profound connection with their environment, an awareness we have almost completely lost. They can read the tracks in the mud, identify hundreds of plants, and predict the weather from the smell of the wind. Their lives are nomadic, following the herds, never staying in one place for long enough to call it home. They carry everything they own on their backs. You see the immense skill in their hands as they knap flint into razor-sharp spear points. But you also see the anxiety in their faces. The younger Dryas has made their life already difficult, almost impossibly so. The herds of gazelle they rely on are thinner this year. The wild grains they would normally gather are sparse. Every day is a struggle for calories, a desperate race to find enough food to fuel their bodies through the cold nights. It is this intense pressure, this existential threat, that is forcing them to think in new ways. Historians and archaeologists still argue about the precise role the younger Dryas played, but many believe this climate shock was the primary catalyst. It was the fire that forced human ingenuity to a breaking point, setting the stage for the invention that would change the world, and the wildcat's destiny, forever. As you observe this ancient world, you might wonder why it was the small, solitary Felis silvestris lybica that would eventually form a partnership with humanity, and not one of the other more imposing felines. Humans in Europe certainly had encounters with the massive cave lion, a creature far larger than any modern lion. But domesticating such an enormous apex predator was simply impossible. It was a competitor, not a companion. A closer candidate might have been the European wildcat, a cousin to our Near Eastern protagonist. But it was generally larger, fiercer, and far less tolerant of any other creature in its territory, including humans. The Near Eastern wildcat, it seems, was in a sweet spot, small enough not to be a major threat, but bold and adaptable enough to eventually see the strange new world of humans not as a danger, but as an opportunity. The die was cast, not by size or strength, but by temperament. Then, as quickly as it began, the cold spell breaks. You feel the air warm over the course of a few short decades, a lifetime in human terms, but the blink of an eye for the planet. The younger Dryas is over. The great ice sheets resume their final shuddering retreat, and a new, stable warmth settles over the globe. This is the beginning of our current geological epoch, the Holocene. For the creatures of the Fertile Crescent, it's as if the world has been reborn in green. You watch as the landscape transforms. The rains return, and the once sparse grasslands erupt into a lush, vibrant sea of green. Rivers that had slowed to a trickle now swell with meltwater, carving new paths through the valleys. Wildflowers carpet the hillsides. The herds of gazelle, goat, and deer return in greater numbers than before, their populations booming in this new Eden. Life everywhere seems to be breathing a collective sigh of relief. For the Near Eastern wildcat, this is a time of plenty. Its hunting grounds are expanding, and prey is abundant. The pressure is off. But amidst this explosion of life, your attention is drawn to a particular set of plants, humble and unassuming, that are flourishing on the hillsides. They are the wild cereal grasses, the ancestors of the crops that would one day feed the world. You see wild einkorn and emmer wheat, wild barley and wild rye. For thousands of years, humans have gathered these grains as a supplemental food source. But now, in this warmer, wetter climate, they grow in vast, dense stands, thick enough to be harvested like a field. These grasses have a unique and crucial property. Unlike many wild plants that drop their seeds the moment they ripen, the seeds of these cereals cling tenaciously to the stalk, waiting to be collected. It's a small botanical detail that makes all the difference. It makes them worth the effort. From the wildcat's hidden vantage point on a rocky outcrop, it notices a change in the behavior of the humans. They are no longer just passing through. The small nomadic bands are spending more and more time in the areas where the wild grains grow thickest. You watch them develop new tools, sharpened flint sickles with bone handles used to reap the stalks, and stone querns, heavy grinding stones used to process the tough grains into a coarse flour. These tools are heavy, not something a people on the move would want to carry. Archaeologists are still piecing together the exact timeline, but this is the very beginning of a sedentary lifestyle. The humans are starting to stay put. They establish a new kind of home, a settlement unlike the temporary camps of their ancestors. This is what we now call a Natufian settlement. You see them digging shallow pits and building sturdy, round houses from stone and wood with thatched roofs. They are not yet farmers, not in the true sense. They are intensive hunter-gatherers, but they have a permanent address. For the wildcat, this is a strange and profound shift in the rhythm of the landscape. The scent of wood smoke is no longer a fleeting sign of a passing band, but a constant presence on the wind. The sounds of human life, the chipping of flint, the grinding of stone, the voices of children, are now a permanent part of the local soundscape. For a creature of solitude and stealth like the wildcat, this growing hub of noise and activity is something to be wary of. Its instinct is to give the settlement a wide berth, to melt back into the wilderness where it belongs. The humans are still a source of potential danger, but their new lifestyle, their decision to stop wandering and build a permanent home around these vast stands of grain, has set a trap. It is a trap not for the wildcat, but for something else entirely. And the wildcat, a creature of pure opportunism, is watching from the shadows, waiting. You are now a witness to the most significant transformation in the human story. The Natufian people, who had settled down to harvest the abundant wild grains, are about to take a revolutionary leap of faith. It's no longer enough to simply reap what nature provides. You watch as a small group of villagers clears a plot of land near the river, removing rocks and pulling weeds. Then, they do something unprecedented. They take some of the grain they harvested last season, the precious food that could keep them alive, and they deliberately cast it into the prepared soil. They are planting. This is the dawn of agriculture. It's difficult to overstate what a monumental gamble this was. For a hunter-gatherer, food is an immediate reward for your effort. You hunt a gazelle, you eat. You gather berries, you eat. But farming is a profound and terrifying delay of gratification. These first farmers were entrusting their survival to a process they did not fully understand, a cycle of sun and rain and seasons that they hoped would yield a return. They were pouring their labor into the earth, clearing land, protecting the tender shoots from animals, and anxiously watching the skies, all for a harvest that was months away and by no means guaranteed. Many anthropologists call this the point of no return, the moment we became tied to the land, and the land, in turn, began to own us. But the gamble pays off. The harvest is more reliable and more abundant than simply gathering from the wild. The human population begins to grow. The small, round houses of the Natufian settlements give way to larger, more permanent structures. You see the birth of the first true towns, places like Jericho, where thousands of people live together. They build massive stone walls and a great stone tower, not necessarily for defense against armies, but perhaps as a communal effort against the spiritual dangers of the world or the simple threat of a flash flood. Society is being rewired. New concepts are emerging: ownership of land, division of labor, and, most importantly for our story, the idea of surplus. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, a single species has figured out how to consistently produce more food than it can immediately consume. The harvest comes in all at once, a massive windfall of grain that must last the entire community until the next harvest. This creates a new and pressing problem: storage. You can't just leave a mountain of grain out in the open. The rain would spoil it, and every hungry animal for miles would descend upon it. And so, humanity creates a new kind of structure, an invention born of this new agricultural wealth. It is the granary, the silo. You watch them build it in the center of the village. It might be a specially constructed hut with a raised floor to keep out the damp, or a deep, plaster-lined pit in the ground. It is a communal vault, a bank whose currency is calories. The wealth of the entire village, its guarantee of survival through the lean winter months, is poured into this single protected space. This simple building, this concentration of food energy, is a beacon. It fundamentally alters the local ecosystem. It is an artificial mountain of food, an irresistible magnet for any small creature that can get inside. For the humans, the granary is the key to their future. For the wildcat, patiently watching from the edge of this new human-made world, the granary is an invitation. It is the reason the cat will finally break its ancient code of solitude and step across the threshold into our world. You can almost smell it on the air. The granary, now full from the harvest, radiates a warm, dusty, and deeply attractive scent of stored grain. For the villagers, it's the smell of security, of a winter survived. But for the small, nocturnal creatures of the surrounding grasslands, it is a siren song. You have created a new ecosystem, a zone of unnatural abundance, and nature, as it always does, is rushing in to fill the void. The first to arrive is a creature that will become as tied to humanity as any other: the house mouse, Mus musculus. Before this moment, the house mouse was a relatively unimportant little rodent, living in small numbers in the wild, eating seeds where it could find them. But the granary is not the wild. The granary is paradise. It is a single, concentrated food source of unimaginable scale, perfectly safe from the rain and the cold, and relatively free of its natural predators like owls and foxes. The mice that are bold enough to venture inside discover a world built for them. They have stumbled into their promised land. You watch as the first few pioneers find their way in, perhaps through a crack in the foundation or a gap under the door. And then, their population begins to grow. And grow. The mathematics of this explosion are staggering, and it's a perfect example of exponential growth. A single female mouse can have her first litter at just 6 weeks old. That litter can have 5 or 6 pups, and the gestation period is only about 3 weeks. She can become pregnant again almost immediately after giving birth. This means that under the perfect conditions of the granary, unlimited food and safety, a single pair of mice can lead to a population of thousands within a single year. The villagers are not just facing a few pests, they are facing a biological wildfire. You can now see the consequences of this unintended infestation. A creeping sense of dread settles over the village. At night, the granary is alive with the sound of scratching and squeaking. The precious grain, the food that cost so much sweat and risk to produce, is being eaten and contaminated. Every sack is fouled with droppings and urine. The smell of security is replaced by the sour stench of a mouse colony. This isn't just an annoyance, it's a catastrophe. It's a direct threat to the survival of the entire community. Every grain the mice eat is a grain a child cannot. It's a question biohistorians ponder. Just how devastating were these first infestations? It's likely they could lead to famine, starvation, and the complete failure of a village. The early farmers would have tried everything they could think of to fight back. They would have tried to seal the granaries more tightly, set crude traps, or even stood guard with clubs. But it would have been a losing battle. They had created the perfect environment for the mice to thrive, and they had no natural ally in this fight. They were fighting a rising tide with their bare hands. In building their new world of agricultural surplus, they had inadvertently rolled out a welcome mat for a creature that could undo it all. The stage is now perfectly set. The problem is established, overwhelming, and seemingly unsolvable. The village is desperate for a savior. And from the shadows at the edge of the firelight, a silent hunter with yellow eyes has been watching this entire disaster unfold with growing interest. You are the wildcat again, resting on your rocky outcrop, observing the human village as the moon rises. The familiar sounds and smells of your own world are still here. The chirp of a cricket, the scent of thyme crushed underfoot. But your senses are being overwhelmed by a powerful new signal coming from the settlement. It's a symphony of squeaks, a constant high-pitched chatter that speaks of immense numbers. And beneath it, a thick, greasy animal scent that makes the fur on your neck prickle. It's the smell of mouse. So many mice. Your traditional hunting grounds are still fruitful, but what they offer is a meager snack compared to the feast this scent promises. Your hunter's brain, honed by millennia of evolution, performs a swift and brutal calculation of risk versus reward. The human village is dangerous. The large, unpredictable apes are a threat. Their fire is a threat. Everything about your instinct screams for caution. Yet the reward is almost beyond comprehension. The concentration of prey is unnatural, a buffet so vast and easy that it defies all logic of the wild world. The allure is too strong to resist. Caution gives way to opportunism. Under the cover of deep night, you slip down from the rocks and move towards the village. You are a ghost, a ripple in the shadows, your padded feet making no sound on the hard, packed earth. You glide along the stone walls, your body low, every muscle coiled and ready to spring back into the darkness at the first sign of danger. The scent is overpowering now, leading you towards the granary. You find a small opening, a place where the foundation stones don't quite meet, and with a flick of your whiskers to gauge the space, you squeeze through. You are inside. The air is thick, warm, and pulsing with life. It is a larder of unimaginable riches. The mice are everywhere, scurrying over the sacks of grain, their bodies sleek and well-fed. For a predator like you, this is a kind of heaven. They are so numerous and so bold that they barely register your presence at first. The hunt is laughably easy. There is no long, patient stalk. There is only a swift, silent rush, a pounce and a kill. Again and again. This isn't hunting for survival anymore. This is pure, unadulterated instinct unleashed in a target-rich environment. Suddenly, a sound from the doorway. You freeze, the mouse still in your jaws. A human figure is silhouetted there, a farmer, woken by the noise. Your body tenses, every fiber screaming at you to flee. The human is huge, a terrifying giant. Your eyes lock. In that split second, a silent interspecies communication takes place, a moment of profound and ancient understanding. The human does not see a thief stealing his grain. He sees you with a dead mouse, the very creature that is destroying his livelihood, in your mouth. He doesn't shout or raise a hand. He simply stands there, watching. He understands. We can only imagine what that first true encounter was like, but it must have been something like this, a moment of quiet realization. You are not his enemy. You are, in fact, the solution to his greatest problem. He takes a slow step back, leaving the way clear. It is a gesture of acceptance, a truce. The unspoken bargain has just been struck. You have been invited in. What you've just witnessed is the birth of a unique relationship, one that doesn't fit neatly into our usual stories of how wild animals became our partners. To understand just how special it is, you need to understand what the word domestication truly means. Scientifically, it's defined as a multi-generational process where one species becomes genetically and permanently modified through its relationship with another, often becoming dependent on humans for survival. Zooarchaeologists have identified a few main routes this journey can take. The most common is the prey pathway. This is the story of animals like goats, sheep, and cattle. We started by hunting them, then we started managing the wild herds, and finally, we brought them into our settlements, breeding them for meat, milk, and wool. Another route is the directed pathway, which applies to animals like horses or camels. This happened much later, when humans already understood the principles of domestication and deliberately set out to tame a specific animal for a specific purpose, like transport. But the cat's story is different. It didn't follow either of these paths. The cat walked the commensal pathway. Commensalism is a biological term for a relationship where one species benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed. At first, this described the cat's relationship with the village perfectly. The cat benefited immensely from the rodent buffet, and the humans were, initially, just passive landlords of this new ecosystem. The cat invited itself. It wasn't captured, it wasn't herded, and it wasn't tamed in any active sense. It simply saw an opportunity and seized it. This is where the true genius of the cat's strategy comes into play. It essentially domesticated itself. Think about the population of wildcats living around that first village. They would have all had different temperaments. Some would have been too fearful, staying far away in the wilderness and missing out on the easy food. Others would have been too aggressive, challenging humans and getting driven off or killed. But in between, there would have been a few individuals in that sweet spot. Bold enough to enter the village, but tolerant enough of human presence to coexist. It's a process biologists call self-selection. These friendlier cats got more food, were safer from larger predators, and likely had more surviving kittens. Over many generations, the genes for tolerance and boldness were passed on, and the cat population living in and around the village slowly began to diverge from their truly wild cousins. Humans, for their part, quickly moved from being passive observers to active, if subtle, participants. That first farmer who saw the cat in his granary didn't need a scientific study to understand the benefits. He could see them with his own eyes. Fewer mice, more grain. This began a simple, unspoken transaction. The cats provided a vital service, and in return, humans offered protection and eventually, provisions. You can picture it easily. a farmer leaving out a wooden bowl with a bit of milk, or a fisherman tossing the guts of his catch to a waiting cat. This wasn't a deliberate attempt to tame a wild animal, it was a simple encouragement, a thank you. It was the beginning of a friendship built on mutual convenience. For a long time, this was just a well-reasoned theory. But then, science provided the proof. In a 5,600-year-old agricultural village in China called Quanhukun, archaeologists found the bones of cats. When scientists analyzed these bones using a technique called isotopic analysis, they found something remarkable. The bones contained high levels of carbon isotopes that came from millet-based plants. The cats weren't eating the millet themselves, they were eating the mice and rats that were gorging on the farmer's stored millet. One cat, an older individual, showed signs of having eaten even more of this millet-based diet, suggesting that as it aged and couldn't hunt as effectively, the farmers were directly feeding it. This was the smoking gun, hard scientific evidence of this ancient, unspoken bargain. The unspoken bargain struck in the granaries of the Fertile Crescent explains the practical side of how cats entered our world. But it doesn't tell us when this relationship of mutual convenience deepened into something more, a genuine bond. To find the first breathtaking clue of that emotional connection, you must leave the mainland behind. You are now traveling across the Mediterranean Sea, heading towards the island of Cyprus, about 9,500 years ago. You are in a simple Neolithic boat, a vessel carved from a single log, and somewhere on board, among the humans, the tools, and the seeds for new crops, is a cat. This fact alone is extraordinary. Cats are not native to the island of Cyprus. There is no way a wildcat could have gotten here on its own. They are famously averse to swimming long distances. The only way a cat could be on this boat is if a human brought it. This tells you that, even at this incredibly early stage, cats were already important enough to be given a precious spot on a colonist's vessel. They were already seen as a vital part of the human toolkit for starting a new life in a new land, likely as a form of mobile pest control for the grains they were also bringing. You land on the southern coast of the island and travel to a settlement called Shilurokambos. It is a thriving Neolithic village, one of the very first on the island. The people here live in the familiar round houses. They farm the new strains of wheat, and they hunt the local animals. Now, fast forward thousands of years. It is 2001, and a team of French archaeologists is carefully excavating this same site. They uncover many things, but one discovery makes the world stop and rethink the entire history of the house cat. They found a grave. Inside lay the skeleton of a human, about 30 years old. Like many important burials from this period, the person was interred with valuable grave goods, objects to accompany them into the afterlife. There were sophisticated flint tools, a polished stone axe, seashells, and other decorative items. But just 40 centimeters away from the human, in its own small, carefully dug pit, was another skeleton. It was a cat, about 8 months old. The two bodies were positioned symmetrically, both facing west. Archaeologists are careful not to overstate the case, but the implications are profound. This was not a random animal that simply fell into a hole. This was a deliberate ritual burial. The cat was not eaten. Its bones were complete and showed no signs of butchery. It was laid to rest with the same care and respect as the human beside it. This changes everything. This wasn't a barn cat. This was a companion, a creature that held a meaningful place in the life of this person. So meaningful that their community ensured they would be united in death. It is the oldest evidence we have for an emotional, affectionate bond between a human and a cat, and it predates the famous cat worship of Egypt by more than 4,000 years. The simple pest control contract had blossomed into something far deeper, far sooner than anyone had ever imagined. This ancient grave in Cyprus is a silent testament to the moment the cat truly entered our homes and our hearts. That grave in Cyprus proves a deep emotional bond, but it also highlights a curious biological puzzle. The skeleton of that 9,500-year-old cat is almost identical to that of a wildcat. If you look at a modern house cat and its ancestor, Felis silvestris lybica, they are still remarkably similar. Now, think about a dog. A tiny Chihuahua and a massive Great Dane look nothing alike, and neither looks much like their ancestor, the grey wolf. Dogs have been radically reshaped by their association with us. So why haven't cats? Why, after nearly 10,000 years of living with us, does your house cat still look like a ghost of its wild past? The answer lies in a fascinating biological phenomenon known as Domestication Syndrome. It's a collection of traits that tend to appear together in domesticated animals. These traits include things like floppy ears, shorter snouts, smaller teeth, a smaller brain, and most noticeably, changes in coat color like spots and patches. For a long time, scientists were stumped as to why selecting for just one trait, tameness, would automatically drag along all these other seemingly unrelated physical changes. It was a complete mystery. The key to unlocking it came from an incredible experiment that began in Russia in the 1950s. A scientist named Dmitry Belyaev decided to try and replicate the domestication of the dog, but using silver foxes. He took a population of wild foxes and, generation after generation, he selected only the tamest, least aggressive individuals to breed. The results were astounding. Within just a few generations, he had foxes that were as friendly and eager to please as dogs. But something else happened that he hadn't planned on. They started to look like dogs. Their coats began to develop white patches, their ears started to get floppy, their tails curled, and their snouts became shorter. He had produced Domestication Syndrome in a laboratory setting. Scientists are still mapping the full extent of these genetic changes, but the leading theory revolves around a special group of embryonic cells called neural crest cells. These cells are like a master control system in a developing embryo. They migrate throughout the body and go on to form a whole host of different tissues, including the adrenal glands, which produce adrenaline, the fight-or-flight hormone, parts of the skull and jaw, the cartilage in the ears, and the melanocytes that produce pigment in the skin and fur. The theory is that when you select for tameness, you are really selecting for animals with reduced adrenaline levels, which means you're selecting for changes in their neural crest cells. But because these same cells are responsible for so many other things, you inadvertently change those traits too. Less adrenaline is linked to less pigment, so you get white spots. It's linked to changes in cartilage, so you get floppy ears. It's a beautiful unified explanation for a bizarre collection of traits. So, back to the cat. Why does it show so little domestication syndrome? The answer has two parts. First, we never put cats under the same intense selective pressure as dogs. We never needed them to be herders, or guardians, or hunters in the same way. We never bred them for specific, complex jobs. For most of history, we just needed them to be reasonably tolerant mouses. Second, and more importantly, the domestic cat's relationship with its wild cousins never truly ended. In many parts of the world today, domestic cats still regularly mate with wildcats, creating a constant flow of wild genes back into the domestic population. This genetic mingling has kept the domestic cat anchored to its ancestral form. It is a tame animal, but it is not a transformed one. The wild ghost still lingers very close to the surface in its genes. You are watching evolution happen in slow motion. Over hundreds, then thousands of years, a new type of cat is emerging in the villages of the Fertile Crescent. It is not yet a true domestic cat, but it is no longer entirely wild. It is the village cat, an animal of the liminal spaces, with one paw in the world of humans and one still firmly in the wilderness. It is still a hunter, still mostly self-sufficient, spending its nights patrolling the granaries and alleys. But it is now a familiar sight, a recognized part of the community's ecosystem. The most visible evidence of this slow separation is written in its coat. Remember, the ancestral wildcat has a very specific pattern. The mackerel tabby, with its thin vertical stripes providing perfect camouflage in the tall grass. But as you watch the village cats, you begin to see something new. A kitten is born with a slightly different pattern. The thin stripes have swirled and thickened into wide, marbled bands and spirals. This is the pattern we now call the classic, or blotched, tabby. It is the result of a single recessive gene mutation. In the wild, this bold, conspicuous pattern would be a disadvantage, making it harder for the cat to blend in and ambush prey. A blotched tabby kitten born in the wild would likely not survive as well as its camouflaged siblings. But in the village, the rules of survival have changed. A cat's success no longer depends entirely on its ability to blend into the grass. Its proximity to the human-provided rodent buffet means that a less than perfect camouflage is not a death sentence. The blotched tabby pattern is no longer being ruthlessly selected against. And so, this new gene begins to spread through the village cat population. Genetic analysis of ancient cat remains has allowed scientists to track this gene's appearance, showing it popping up in the Near East and later becoming very common in domesticated cats in Europe. This single gene acts as a genetic breadcrumb, a living marker of the cat's journey away from the wild. This raises a fascinating question. Were our ancestors aware of what they were doing? Scholars still debate how conscious this early process was. Was a Neolithic farmer actively choosing the friendliest, most tolerant cats to encourage? Or was it a more passive process, where the cats that were naturally less fearful simply hung around more, had better access to food, and therefore reproduced more successfully? The most likely answer is a blend of both. Humans were probably not trying to create a domestic animal. They were simply favoring the individual cats that were most useful and least troublesome. They might have chased off an aggressive cat that hissed at their children, while leaving a morsel for a calmer one that allowed them to approach. These thousands of tiny individual decisions made by countless people over centuries acted as a gentle but persistent evolutionary pressure. It was a form of unconscious selection. The result was the village cat, a creature perfectly adapted to this new niche. It was tolerated, respected, and useful. It was given a name, perhaps, and its presence was a comfort. But it was not yet a pet in the way we would understand it. It did not belong to a single person, but to the village itself. It was a semi-wild resident, a four-legged neighbor with a very important job, living a life of comfortable, well-fed independence. The foundation had been laid, but the next great chapter in the cat's story would take place in another land, a place where its status would be elevated from a humble pest controller to that of a living god. For several thousand years, the story of the cat remains a quiet one, a slow, subtle evolution playing out in the villages and early cities of the Near East. But now, you are going to leave that world behind. You travel south and west, across the harsh Sinai Peninsula, until you reach the banks of a great, life-giving river. The air here is different, hotter, scented with lotus flowers and the rich, black silt left behind by the annual flood. You are in Egypt, around 4,000 years ago, during the height of the Middle Kingdom. This is a civilization on a completely different scale. The small Neolithic village of Jericho, with its stone tower, is a child's toy compared to the colossal temples of Karnak and the looming pyramids at Giza. This is a society of immense organization, wealth, and power, all of it built on a single miraculous foundation: the River Nile. Every year, like clockwork, the Nile overflows its banks, depositing a fresh layer of incredibly fertile black soil across the valley. This annual inundation allows for an agricultural surplus that dwarfs anything the early farmers of the Fertile Crescent could have imagined. The society you are witnessing is, in essence, a massive, state-run food production machine. Egyptologists have long referred to this land as the breadbasket of the ancient world, and for good reason. The pharaoh's power is directly tied to his ability to control the grain. The granaries here are not small village huts. They are vast, state-administered complexes of towering beehive-shaped silos. The grain they hold is the currency of the empire. It pays the wages of the thousands of laborers who build the pyramids. It feeds the armies that defend the borders, and it funds the powerful priesthood that maintains cosmic order. The security of this grain is not a personal problem for a village elder. It is a matter of national security, the absolute bedrock of the entire Egyptian state. And with this immense concentration of wealth comes an immense and familiar threat. The pests, the mice and rats that plagued the first Neolithic granaries are here in Egypt too, but their numbers are biblical in scale. A significant infestation in one of the state granaries could be a genuine disaster, leading to unrest, instability, and a weakening of the pharaoh's authority. But there is another, even more terrifying threat that slithers out of the reeds along the Nile: the cobra and the viper. These venomous snakes, attracted by the rodents in the grain stores, posed a deadly threat to the workers. Into this high-stakes environment walks the cat. The same Near Eastern wildcat that first ventured into the villages thousands of years earlier is also native to the lands around Egypt, and it arrives here to perform the same vital job, but on a much grander stage. Here, the cat is not just a convenient pest controller. It is a guardian of the wealth of the nation, a protector of the divine order of the pharaoh. Its job is elevated from a mere transaction to a sacred duty. You can see them now, patrolling the great granaries of Amun-Ra, not as feral opportunists, but as sanctioned, respected agents of the state. They are useful, yes, but in a land where religion permeates every aspect of daily life, their usefulness is about to be interpreted in a new, divine light. Their status is about to be transformed from a humble hunter into a living god. In the Egyptian mind, there was no hard line between the practical and the divine. An animal that protected the nation's food supply wasn't just useful. Its usefulness was a sign of its sacred power. You see this idea blossom in the worship of a goddess who would become the ultimate patron of the cat, Bastet. Originally, Bastet was a goddess with the head of a fierce lioness. a protector deity of Lower Egypt, and a warrior who could defend the pharaoh. But as the centuries passed and the smaller cat became more and more integrated into Egyptian life, her image softened. The ferocious lioness gradually transformed into a goddess with the head of a domestic cat. Her portfolio changed too. She became the goddess of the home, of fertility, of joy, music, and dance, and the protector of the family from evil spirits. She represented the ideal of the domestic cat itself, a creature that could be a gentle, nurturing presence in the home, but could still call upon the ferocity of its lion-hearted ancestor to strike down a venomous snake or a scorpion. You travel now to the city of Bubastis in the Nile Delta, the center of her cult. Here, you find a magnificent temple dedicated to her, filled with thousands of bronze statues of cats left as offerings. The city is teeming with cats, sacred animals that are cared for and fed by the temple priests. They are the living incarnations of the goddess. But this reverence has a dark and commercial side. Archaeology has revealed a massive industry centered on providing offerings for the goddess. Vast cat cemeteries have been unearthed here and at other sites, containing, quite literally, millions of mummified cats. Egyptologists debate whether this represented genuine piety or a cynical, commercialized industry, but the scientific evidence is stark. CT scans of these ancient mummies show that the vast majority of them were not beloved pets who died of old age. They were young cats, between 2 and 10 months old, who had been deliberately killed, often by having their necks broken, to be mummified and sold to pilgrims as an offering to Bastet. It was a mass-produced religious token, a business on an industrial scale. But Bastet wasn't the only divine role for the cat. In the most important religious text, the Book of the Dead, the great sun god Ra himself takes the form of a cat to fight his ultimate enemy. Every night as the sun travels through the underworld, it is attacked by the Serpent of Chaos, a monstrous snake named Apep. In one famous illustration, Ra is depicted as the Great Tomcat, a huge brindled cat with a knife, slicing off the head of the serpent beneath the sacred Persea tree. The cat, the humble Mauser, was a symbol for the most powerful god in the pantheon. In his role as the ultimate protector of cosmic order, this reverence wasn't just confined to temples and myths, it permeated everyday life. As you look at the paintings on the walls of tombs in Thebes, you see the evidence everywhere. These paintings, which depict an idealized version of daily life for the deceased to enjoy in the afterlife, are filled with cats. You see them sitting under the chairs of noblewomen, who are sometimes shown feeding them tidbits of fish. You see cats joining men on hunting and fowling expeditions in the Nile marshes, flushing out birds for their human companions. This wasn't just a god to be worshipped from afar. This was a cherished member of the family, a companion whose presence was desired even in paradise. This intense cultural and religious focus on the cat in Egypt had a profound biological consequence. For thousands of years you have seen the cat living on the fringes of human society in the Fertile Crescent. But here in Egypt, they are brought into the very heart of the home and the temple. This creates a powerful new evolutionary pressure cooker. The cats that are friendlier, more sociable, and more tolerant of being handled and adored are the ones that thrive. This isn't the gentle, almost accidental selection of the first villages. This is a much more focused, if still not fully intentional, process. The result is what geneticists now believe was a second, powerful wave of domestication. Whether this was a true second domestication of a separate wild population, or simply an intensification and popularization of the already semi-domesticated cat, is a matter of scientific debate, but the genetic evidence is clear. By analyzing the DNA of ancient cat mummies and comparing it to modern cats, scientists have traced two major ancestral lineages. The first is that old lineage from the Fertile Crescent, but the second, which appeared thousands of years later, comes from Egypt. And it is this Egyptian lineage that would go on to become the dominant ancestor of most domestic cats around the world today. The Egyptian cat was, in essence, the model that took over the world. You can see the archaeological proof for this deepening relationship at a site called Hierakonpolis, one of the earliest cities in Egypt. In a cemetery for high-status citizens, archaeologists found a small burial plot containing 2 adult cats and 4 kittens, dating back about 3,700 years. This wasn't a mass grave of offerings like at Bubastis. This looked like a family plot, and one of the skeletons told a remarkable story. The cat, a young male, had broken both of the bones in its front left leg, the ulna and the radius. They were severe fractures that would have been completely debilitating for a wild animal. Yet the bones had healed. The only way this could have happened is if the cat had been cared for, its leg splintered and protected, and it was fed and kept safe while it recovered. This is evidence of a level of care that borders on veterinary medicine, a sign of an incredibly deep and personal bond. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing much later in the 5th century BCE, observed this unique Egyptian reverence for cats with fascination and disbelief. He is the source for the famous claim that if a house burned down, the Egyptians were often more concerned with saving their cats than their property. He wrote that the penalty for intentionally killing a cat was death, and that even the accidental killing of a cat could result in severe punishment. And he reported the extraordinary mourning ritual. When a family's pet cat died of natural causes, all the members of the household would shave off their eyebrows as a sign of their deep grief. While Herodotus was known to exaggerate for dramatic effect, his accounts capture the essence of a culture that had elevated the cat to an unparalleled status. This was the environment that forged the Egyptian cat, a creature not just tolerated for its utility, but actively loved, protected by law, and mourned like a family member. This was the cat that was ready to conquer the world. The Egyptians' adoration for their cats created a unique geopolitical situation. They treasured these animals so much, viewing them as sacred protectors and national treasures, that they officially banned their export. You couldn't just buy a cat in an Egyptian market and take it home. They were a protected, strategic asset, not for sale to outsiders. But this is a classic lesson in economics. When you have a highly desirable product and you forbid its sale, you don't stop the trade. You just drive it underground. You create a black market. You are now on the bustling docks of Avaris, a great port city in the Nile Delta. The air is thick with the smells of cedarwood from Lebanon, olive oil from Crete, and spices from lands far to the east. This is a crossroads of the ancient world, and the masters of these crossroads are the Phoenicians. They are the greatest maritime traders of their age, their sturdy ships linking the great empires, and they are masters of the contraband trade. While no official records of this specific black market exist, historians believe it was these Phoenician merchants who became the primary vectors for the cat's exodus from Egypt. You watch as a Phoenician captain discreetly negotiates with a local farmer, or perhaps even a low-level priest from a nearby temple. He isn't buying grain or papyrus, he is buying cats. It's a risky business for everyone involved. The Egyptians selling the cats could face severe punishment if caught. The Phoenician captain has to smuggle them aboard his ship, perhaps hidden inside a large amphora or a bundle of linen. He might have a small breeding pair, or a whole basket of kittens. To him, these animals are worth more than their weight in silver. They are a luxury good, a piece of exotic and highly useful biological technology that the rest of the world desperately wants. The ship sets sail, leaving the Nile behind and heading out into the deep blue of the Mediterranean. On board, the cats are freed from their hiding places. They are valuable cargo, and they are treated well. They are also immediately put to work, hunting the rats and mice that are an inevitable part of life on any wooden ship. For the Phoenician sailors, the cats are not gods, but they are incredibly good luck, protecting their food stores and their valuable ropes from being gnawed through by vermin. When the ship makes port in a city in Greece or on an island in the Aegean, the captain has a ready market. A wealthy landowner plagued by rats in his granary, a noblewoman who has heard tales of the sleek, graceful pets of the Egyptians, they will all pay a handsome price. Each cat sold is a seed planted in a new land. This clandestine trade, a combination of official policy, human desire, and commercial opportunism, is the mechanism that launches the cat on its great global journey. The fiercely protected, temple-raised, sociable cat of Egypt has broken its golden chains. It is now poised to conquer the rest of the ancient world, not with an army, but with a silent tread and a quiet purr. The Phoenician smugglers may have opened the door, but it was the cat's own unique set of skills that allowed it to walk through and conquer the world. Its next great role, and the one that would carry it to every corner of the known world, was that of the ship's cat. You are now on the deck of a Roman grain freighter, a few centuries later. The ship is making its way from the port of Alexandria in Egypt to Ostia, the port of Rome. It is the belly of this vessel, however, that holds both its purpose and its greatest vulnerability. The hold is crammed with sacks of Egyptian wheat, the food that will keep the population of Rome from rioting. But this precious cargo is under constant assault. At night, the darkness comes alive with the skittering of rats. They are a sailor's nightmare. They devour and contaminate the grain, representing a direct loss of profit and provisions. They chew through the ship's ropes and sails, a slow, insidious sabotage that could lead to disaster in a storm. And they carry diseases like typhus and leptospirosis, a constant threat to the health of the crew packed into these tight quarters. Into this dangerous, self-contained world, the cat is the perfect solution. It is a masterpiece of biological engineering, seemingly designed for life at sea. You watch as a sleek tabby cat, a descendant of those smuggled out of Egypt, patrols the dark, swaying hold. Its incredible sense of balance, a product of its flexible spine and its inner ear, allows it to navigate the rolling of the ship with effortless grace. This is the same system that gives cats their famous righting reflex, their ability to always land on their feet. While the human sailors struggle to keep their footing, the cat moves like a liquid shadow. Furthermore, its physical needs are minimal. Fresh water was always a strictly rationed and precious commodity on any long voyage, but a cat can get most of the moisture it needs directly from the prey it consumes, allowing it to survive and thrive where other animals might perish from thirst. Its eyes, with their vertical pupils and the tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer that makes them glow in the dark, are perfectly adapted for hunting in the near-total blackness of the ship's hold. The rats have nowhere to hide. It's impossible to know how many ancient voyages were saved by a humble cat, but maritime historians agree that their role was vital. A ship with a good cat, or a small family of them, was a safer, cleaner, and more profitable ship. They weren't just passengers, they were essential members of the crew, a vital piece of the ship's equipment. But their role went beyond the purely practical. Sailors are a notoriously superstitious lot, and the cat, with its mysterious, independent nature and its uncanny ability to seem calm just before a storm hits, quickly became a powerful good luck charm. A happy ship's cat was a sign of a smooth voyage and a safe return to port. To harm a ship's cat was to invite disaster upon the entire vessel. From the galleys of Rome to the longships of the Vikings, this small, self-sufficient predator became the constant companion of humanity on the high seas, the unsung hero that protected the arteries of trade and exploration. Every new port they visited was another beachhead, another opportunity to hop ashore and begin the next phase of their quiet conquest. The ship's cat may have been the perfect vehicle for a global tour, but arriving in a new port didn't guarantee an immediate welcome. As the Egyptian cat hops off the gangplank and sets its paws on the shores of Greece and Rome, it doesn't find a world waiting with open arms. It finds a world that already has a solution for its pest problem. It finds competition. You are walking through the bustling agora of 5th century Athens. The air is filled with the sounds of merchants hawking their wares and philosophers debating in the shade of a colonnade. If you follow a wealthy citizen back to his home, a sprawling villa built around a central courtyard, you might expect to see a cat chasing mice. But you don't. Instead, you see a long, slinky, and surprisingly fierce little animal darting out from under a table, a weasel or a ferret. For centuries, the Greeks and Romans had relied on these mustelids as their primary form of pest control. They were adept hunters, able to follow rodents down into their burrows. The Greek word for them was gale, and they were a common feature of the household. In one of Aesop's fables, the goddess Aphrodite transforms a pet weasel into a beautiful woman to be a man's bride, only to watch in dismay as the new bride completely forgets her wedding to chase a mouse across the floor. This story tells you everything you need to know. The weasel was a familiar domestic animal, but its wild hunting instincts were impossible to tame. This was the core of the problem. Ferrets and weasels are effective, but they make for difficult house guests. They have a strong, musky odor that can permeate a house. They are notoriously difficult to house train, and they have a habit of stealing and hoarding food or shiny objects. And while they kill mice, they are also quite capable of raiding the chicken coop or killing pet birds. They were a tool, but a messy and often frustrating one. When the first cats arrived, smuggled from Egypt, they were seen as an exotic and expensive novelty. You can see this in the art of the period. One of the very first depictions of a cat in Greece appears on the marble base of a statue from around 510 BCE, showing two young men egging on a cat and a dog to fight. In Roman mosaics from Pompeii, cats are often shown stalking a partridge, depicted as a wild hunter, not a domestic companion. Classical scholars note that early textual references are often ambiguous. The Greek word ailuros could mean a cat, but it might also have referred to a marten or a weasel. The cat was present, but it hadn't yet taken over. But slowly, over the course of centuries, the tide began to turn. The cat had a set of crucial advantages that made it a superior domestic partner. First, it was remarkably The cat's innate instinct to bury its own waste in a discreet spot, the behavior we now accommodate with a litter box, made it a far more pleasant and hygienic animal to have inside a home. It lacked the pungent odor of its mustelid rivals, and while it was a perfect mouse killer, it was generally less of a threat to other household animals. The cat didn't win the hearts of Greece and Rome overnight. It won them with a slow, quiet campaign of superior domesticity, proving itself to be the cleaner, more pleasant, and ultimately more effective choice. It outcompeted the competition, and by the height of the Roman Empire, it was well on its way to becoming the undisputed master of the European household. The cat had won the home, but its true conquest of the continent would be an inside job, accomplished by marching alongside the most powerful army the world had ever seen. The real distribution network for the domestic cat in Europe was the Roman Empire itself. You are on a stone-paved road in Gaul, the sound of marching feet and creaking wagon wheels echoing through the forest. This is the sound of the Roman Empire expanding. You are following a legion, a self-contained city of 5,000 men on the move. And an army, as the old saying goes, marches on its stomach. The logistical train that follows this legion is staggering. Wagon after wagon is filled with grain, the fuel for this military machine. Every new territory they conquer is secured with a network of roads and a chain of forts, or castra. And with every sack of grain, with every new fort, comes the cat. You watch as the legion sets up a new permanent fort on the misty banks of the Rhine River, a frontier outpost at the very edge of the known world. The fort is a perfect microcosm of Rome itself, with its barracks, its bathhouse, its commander's quarters, and, most importantly, its granary, the Horaeum. This large, well-ventilated building, with its raised floor to protect against damp, is immediately filled with the grain needed to sustain the garrison through the winter. And just as it was in the first Neolithic villages 10,000 years before, this concentration of food is an irresistible magnet for the local rodent population. But the Romans have learned their lesson. Unpacking their supplies, you see a few cats emerging from crates, blinking in the unfamiliar northern light. These are the descendants of the Egyptian cats, now thoroughly integrated into Roman life. They are not officially on the legion's roster, but they are as much a part of the army as the blacksmith or the cook. They are the unofficial, non-combatant guardians of the food supply. It's a pattern archaeologists call synanthropic dispersal, the spread of a species that is so tied to humans, it follows our migrations and expansions perfectly. The archaeological record tells this story with beautiful clarity. As you move north and west through Europe, cat bones are almost completely absent from Iron Age sites before the Roman arrival. But once you start excavating Roman-era forts and villas in places like Germany, France, and Britain, they suddenly appear. Their skeletons are found in the rubbish pits, in the ruins of kitchens, and sometimes even in their own small graves. The cat's distribution map in Europe follows the Roman eagle, tracing the path of the legions to the farthest flung corners of the empire. Here, on these wild frontiers, another crucial intermingling takes place. The domestic cat, whose ancestors came from the warm deserts of the Near East, encounters its European cousin, the larger, more robust, and fiercely independent European wildcat, Felis silvestris. Inevitably, the two populations begin to interbreed. This introduces a new infusion of wild genes into the domestic cat's lineage, likely making it hardier and better adapted to the colder, wetter climates of Northern Europe. The cat that would eventually emerge from the ashes of the Roman Empire would be a hybrid, a creature with the sociability of its Egyptian ancestors and a dash of the rugged wildness from its European cousins. The Roman Empire eventually crumbles, its roads falling into disrepair and its legions scattered. But the cat's journey does not stop. It has already put down roots across the continent, and now it finds a new partner to carry it even farther: the Norsemen, the people we call the Vikings. You are now on a different kind of ship. This is not a lumbering Roman freighter. It's a sleek, dragon-headed longship cutting through the cold, grey waters of the North Sea. The air is sharp with the taste of salt and the smell of wet wool and oiled leather. This is a vessel built for raiding and exploration, and on its deck, calmly washing its face, is a cat. For the Vikings, a seafaring people who pushed the boundaries of the known world, the cat was just as essential a crew member as it was for the Romans. It protected their food, their sails, and their ropes as they voyaged to Britain, Iceland, Greenland, and even the distant shores of North America. Genetic evidence from a Viking trading post in northern Germany confirms that these seafarers were indeed carrying their feline companions with them, continuing the spread of that successful Egyptian lineage. But in the cold lands of the north, the cat achieved a status it hadn't held since its time in Egypt. It once again entered the world of myth. You are sitting now in a longhouse, the air thick with wood smoke from a central fire. A storyteller, a skald, is weaving a tale of the gods. He speaks of Freya, the powerful and beautiful goddess of love, fertility, war, and wealth. And when he describes her arrival, it is in a magnificent chariot pulled not by horses, but by two enormous cats. These are no ordinary cats. Norse scholars suggest they were likely inspired by the large, shaggy-haired cats of the northern forests, perhaps the ancestors of the modern Norwegian forest cat. In some later traditions, they are even given names: Beigul and Triegul, which translate to bee gold and tree gold, beautiful poetic terms for honey and amber. The cat, this small, desert-born animal, has been elevated to a creature of divine power, fit to serve one of the most important deities in the Norse pantheon. To be associated with Freyja was to be associated with female strength, magic, and the very essence of life and prosperity. Farmers would leave out bowls of milk in their fields to entice cats, believing that their presence would ensure a good harvest, a direct blessing from the goddess herself. Think for a moment about the sheer scale of this journey. You have followed this one creature from its solitary life in the grasslands of the Fertile Crescent, some 10,000 years ago. You watched it strike a bargain in the first granaries, then witnessed its burial with a human companion on Cyprus. You saw it elevated to the status of a god in the temples of Egypt, smuggled out by Phoenician traders, and spread throughout Europe as an essential piece of equipment in the Roman war machine. And now you see it here, at the end of the first millennium, pulling the chariot of a Viking goddess in the snowy lands of the north. From the burning sands of the Sahara to the icy fjords of Norway, the cat has become a ubiquitous presence in the human world. Its quiet, patient, and opportunistic conquest of the continent seems complete. Its place in our homes and our hearts seems secure. Its success appears absolute. But a dark shadow is gathering in the south, and the cat's fortunes are about to take a terrifying and tragic turn. As the light of the first millennium dawns, the cat's status in northern Europe is secure, tied to powerful pagan goddesses. But to understand the tragedy that is about to unfold, you must first travel to another part of the world, where a new faith is rising, and the cat's destiny will take a radically different path. You are now leaving the cold, damp forests of the north and journeying back to the warm, arid lands of the Near East. You are in the bustling cosmopolitan city of Damascus, the heart of the burgeoning Islamic Caliphate. Here, in the courtyards of mosques and the gardens of scholars, the cat is not a creature of myth or magic. It is something far more profound, a symbol of cleanliness, a respected companion, and a creature beloved by the Prophet himself. The Islamic world's attitude towards the cat is shaped by a collection of stories and traditions, the most famous of which is the tale of Mu'ezza. You are in a quiet room. The midday call to prayer has just sounded. The Prophet Muhammad is preparing to go to the mosque, and he reaches for his robe. But he stops. He sees that his favorite cat, a beautiful tabby named Mu'ezza, has fallen asleep on one of the sleeves. Rather than wake the peacefully sleeping animal, the Prophet takes a knife and carefully, silently, cuts the sleeve from his garment, leaving the cat to its slumber and going to prayer in his now mutilated robe. In another version of the story, upon his return, the cat bows to him in gratitude, and in response, he strokes her back 3 times, granting her the ability to always land on her feet. While the story of Mu'ezza itself is considered by many Islamic scholars to be a later legend rather than a historically confirmed event, its influence on the culture's attitude towards cats is undeniable and immense. It frames the cat as a creature worthy of respect and gentle consideration, an animal whose comfort is more important than a piece of clothing, even for the most important of men. This single story sets a powerful precedent of kindness. This reverence is reinforced by other aspects of the faith. In Islam, dogs are sometimes considered ritually unclean, but cats are seen as the epitome of cleanliness. They are permitted to enter mosques and homes. The water from which a cat has drunk is considered pure and suitable for use in religious ablutions before prayer. They are admired for their meticulous grooming, their quiet nature, and their independence. They are seen as the perfect pets for a scholar's study or a quiet home. You see this attitude reflected in the streets of the city. While stray dogs might be chased away, the cats are a welcome and protected part of the community. In later centuries, charitable trusts known as Waqf would be set up in cities like Cairo and Damascus, specifically to fund the feeding and care of the city's stray cat population. This deep-seated cultural affection provides a crucial, stark contrast. As a new and fervent religious orthodoxy begins to take hold in medieval Europe, the cat's pagan associations with goddesses like Freya will become a deadly liability. But here, in the Islamic world, the cat is safe. Its status is not tied to magic or old gods, but to a simple and powerful example of compassion. This parallel story is essential because it proves that the dark fate awaiting the cat in Europe was not inevitable. It was a choice, a tragic cultural turn that would have devastating consequences. You must now leave the sun-drenched courtyards of Damascus and travel north again, into the heart of medieval Europe. The world you enter is a much different place from the one you left. The great unified Roman Empire is a distant memory, and the Viking longships are giving way to stone castles. But the most powerful force here is not a king or an emperor. It is the church. You are in a world gripped by a fervent and anxious faith, a society where the lines between the natural and the supernatural are perilously thin, and the fear of the devil is everywhere. And for the cat, this is a very dangerous time. The very things that once elevated the cat in the pagan world now become evidence of its damnation. Think of the Norse goddess Freya riding her cat-drawn chariot. To the early Christian missionaries, Freya was a demon, a pagan seductress. Therefore, her sacred animals must also be demonic. In the old Roman traditions, the goddess of the hunt and the moon, Diana, was said to sometimes take the form of a cat. This too was twisted. An old woman living alone in the woods, a follower of the old ways, might be accused of worshipping Diana, and the cat at her hearth becomes proof of her heresy. Historians of this period call this process demonization, the deliberate rebranding of old gods and their symbols as instruments of evil to consolidate the power of the new faith. The cat's own nature worked against it. Its biology was reinterpreted through a lens of pure superstition. You watch a black cat slip through an alley at midnight. Its silence is no longer seen as a hunter's grace, but as a sinister stealth, the ability to move unseen to do the devil's work. Its eyes, which glow in the dark thanks to the reflective tapetum lucidum, are no longer admired as a marvel of nocturnal adaptation. They are seen as hellfire, two burning embers that have looked directly into the abyss. Its famous independence is no longer a sign of its proud spirit, but a sign of its arrogance and refusal to be tamed by God-fearing man. Its nocturnal cries, especially the loud wailing calls of a female in heat, are interpreted as the tormented screams of damned souls. Every natural, understandable trait of the cat is twisted into something monstrous. And this all culminates in a new and terrifying concept: the witch's familiar. The idea takes hold that a witch cannot perform her dark magic alone. She needs a demonic assistant, a spirit given to her by the devil to be her servant and spy. And this spirit, this familiar, could take the form of an animal. The toad, the owl, the bat, all were suspects. But the cat, particularly the black cat, with its pagan past and its unnatural nocturnal habits, becomes the archetypal familiar. You see it in the stories that begin to circulate. A village woman is seen talking to her cat, and it is assumed she is not just talking to a pet, but giving instructions to a demon. A cat is seen near the home of someone who has fallen ill, and it is accused of having brought the sickness with its evil magic. The cat is no longer a neighbor, a pest controller, or a companion. It has become a vessel for the devil, a spy for the forces of darkness hiding in plain sight. This web of fear and superstition is tightening, and it is about to trigger a wave of persecution that will last for centuries. The simmering superstition is about to boil over into official, sanctioned persecution. You are now in Rome, in the year 1233. Pope Gregory IX issues a papal bull, an official edict from the highest authority in Christendom. It is called Vox in Rama, a voice in Rama, and it is primarily directed at a supposed heretical cult in Germany. But within its text is a passage that will have catastrophic consequences for cats across Europe. The document describes the initiation rites of the cult, detailing a scene where a black cat emerges, to which the new initiates must give a ritualistic kiss. The bull explicitly states that this cat is an incarnation of Satan. This is the moment the cat's death warrant is signed. It is no longer just a matter of village superstition or folk tales. The link between cats, particularly black cats, and the devil is now enshrined in an official document from the Pope himself. It gives a theological justification for the fear and hatred that had been brewing for centuries. It gives people permission, indeed a sacred duty, to hunt down and destroy these supposed agents of evil. The Great Persecution begins. While some modern historians suggest the scale of this persecution might be exaggerated in popular culture, the documentary and artistic evidence of widespread, systematic cruelty is undeniable and horrifying. Across Europe, cats are hunted, tortured, and killed in vast numbers, often as the centerpiece of public festivals. In Ypres, Belgium, the festival of Kattenstoet begins, where cats are thrown from the belfry of the town's cloth hall to the cheering crowds below. In France, on the eve of the feast of Saint John the Baptist, it becomes a popular tradition to hoist a barrel or a sack filled with live cats over a bonfire, burning them alive as a way to drive away evil spirits. You see this playing out at a village level. An old woman accused of witchcraft is put on trial, and the primary evidence against her is her pet cat, her supposed familiar. The cat is often tortured to force a confession from its owner, and then killed alongside her, sometimes by being burned at the same stake. The cat has become a proxy for the devil, a physical target for the fear and anxiety of an age. To kill a cat is seen as a virtuous act, a small victory in the great war against the forces of darkness. The sheer tragedy of this reversal is staggering. You have followed this animal from the temples of Egypt, where it was worshipped as a god, and its killing was a capital crime. You saw it protected and revered, its body carefully mummified to preserve it for eternity. And now, you see its descendants being demonized by another powerful religion, declared to be the very image of evil and brutally killed for sport. The creature that was once a symbol of divine protection is now the target of a holy war. This is the absolute nadir of the cat's long journey with humanity, a period of darkness and cruelty that would stain our shared history for the next 500 years. You are standing on the docks of the Sicilian port of Messina in October of the year 1347. You see a fleet of 12 Genoese trading ships pulling into the harbor, returning from a long journey to the Black Sea. But as they draw closer, a horrifying sight greets the onlookers. The ships are mostly silent. Most of the sailors who crew them are either dead or dying, their bodies covered in strange black boils that ooze blood and pus. The terrified authorities order the death ships out of the harbor, but it is too late. The plague has arrived. The Black Death has begun its terrifying march across Europe. For the next 5 years, a wave of death unlike anything in recorded history will sweep the continent, killing at least a third of the entire population, and in some places, more than half. It is a time of unimaginable horror, a world turned upside down, where the living have trouble keeping up with burying the dead. The science of this catastrophe would not be understood for another 500 years. You, however, can see the invisible enemy that came ashore with those ships. It is a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. But the bacterium doesn't travel on its own. Its primary host is the flea, and the flea's primary host is an animal that has been a shadowy passenger on humanity's journey for millennia. The black rat, Rattus rattus. This is the transmission cycle of the plague. The bacterium infects the flea bites the rat, and the rats, living in the walls of homes and the holds of ships, bring the infected fleas into catastrophic contact with human beings. And here lies the devastating, historical irony. For the past 2 centuries, in its fervent and superstitious war against a supposed evil, Europe had been systematically and brutally destroying the single most efficient predator of the plague's primary carrier. Now historians fiercely debate the direct link, and it would be a vast oversimplification to say that killing cats caused the Black Death. The plague was a complex event with many causes, including sanitation, population density, and the specific biology of the bacterium. The plague also ravaged the Islamic world, where cats were protected. However, one cannot ignore the basic ecological reality. In a world without effective poisons or modern traps, the cat was the single most important check on the urban and rural rat population. The war on cats had, without a doubt, allowed the rat population in many parts of Europe to grow to unprecedented levels. Every town square where cats were burned, every village where they were hunted down, had become a safer place for rats to breed and thrive. You can almost picture it. A rat carrying a dozen infected fleas scurries across a city street, a street where a few years earlier a cat would have swiftly and silently killed it. But the cat is gone, a victim of superstition, and the rat continues on its way, an unnoticed herald of death. It is impossible to calculate the exact effect, but the absence of this key predator certainly did not help. In its desperate attempt to purge a symbolic spiritual evil, medieval society had inadvertently helped cripple its own defenses against a real, biological one. The irony is as tragic as it is profound. The creature they condemned as a demon was, in fact, one of their most vital, unrecognized guardians. The Black Death finally loosens its grip, leaving behind a shattered, emptier, and profoundly changed Europe. The continent slowly, painfully, begins to recover. Out of this trauma, a new way of thinking is born. You are in Florence, in the 15th century. This is the heart of the Renaissance, a great flowering of art, science, and humanism. It is a world where observation is beginning to challenge superstition, and reason is starting to push back against blind faith. And in this new intellectual climate, the cat begins its slow, long road to rehabilitation. The practical arguments in its favor are simply undeniable. The sprawling cities of the Renaissance are crowded, unsanitary, and, as always, teeming with rats and mice. After the collective trauma of the plague, the importance of controlling the rodent population is keenly felt, even if the precise mechanism of disease is not understood. The cat, the silent and efficient hunter, is the most obvious and effective tool for the job. Its usefulness, which had been overshadowed by centuries of demonic folklore, becomes plain to see once more. People might still cross themselves when a black cat passes, but they are more than willing to let a tabby patrol their kitchens and storerooms. You can see this changing attitude reflected in the art of the period, the great mirror of its culture. For centuries, cats were largely absent from art, or appeared only as small demonic figures in depictions of hell or the fall of Adam and Eve. But now they begin to creep back into domestic scenes. You see them in paintings of the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel tells the Virgin Mary she will bear the Son of God. A small cat is often shown sleeping by the hearth, a quiet symbol of domesticity and peaceful home life. However, its reputation is not yet fully restored. Art historians have noted the cat's ambiguous role in these paintings. In some depictions of the Last Supper, a cat is shown sitting at the feet of Judas Iscariot, a symbol of his betrayal and deceit. The cat is allowed back into the house, but it is still not entirely trusted. It embodies a dual nature, a comforting presence on one hand, and a sly, independent, untrustworthy creature on the other. Perhaps no one captures the new spirit of observation better than the ultimate Renaissance man, Leonardo da Vinci. You are in his studio, looking over his shoulder at his notebooks. Among the designs for flying machines and the anatomical studies of human muscles, you find page after page filled with sketches of cats. He draws them in every conceivable posture, sleeping, stretching, fighting, playing, and washing. He is not interested in superstition. He is captivated by the cat's perfect anatomy, its fluid grace, and its complex psychology. He writes in the margins, "The smallest feline is a masterpiece." In his eyes, the cat is not a demon or a god. It is a marvel of natural engineering, an object worthy of intense scientific and artistic study. This is the turning point. The cat is being looked at again, not through a veil of fear, but with the clear eyes of artists and thinkers. It is not yet a cherished pet in the modern sense. It is still, for most people, a working animal, a four-legged employee. But the centuries of relentless, brutal persecution are coming to an end. The cat's long, dark night is finally over, and a new dawn is breaking. The intellectual curiosity of the Renaissance gives way to an age of explosive physical expansion. You are on the docks of Palos, Spain, in the year 1492. The air is thick with anticipation and the smell of salt and tar. A driven navigator named Christopher Columbus is preparing his 3 small ships for a voyage into the unknown, a desperate gamble to find a new route to the riches of the East. And as the final supplies are loaded, the barrels of hardtack, the casks of water, the navigational charts, you see a few cats being carried aboard. The age of exploration has begun, and once again, the cat is coming along for the ride. Its role as a ship's cat is now more critical than ever. The voyages of the Romans and Vikings were coastal hops compared to these terrifying, months-long journeys across vast, empty oceans. On a ship like the Santa Maria, a single rat infestation could mean the difference between life and death. The food stores were barely enough to last the journey under ideal conditions. Any loss to vermin could lead to starvation and mutiny. The cat was not a luxury. It was a non-negotiable piece of equipment, a living insurance policy against disaster. So vital were they that some ships' charters and trade agreements from this era would explicitly specify the number of cats to be kept on board. You follow the cat across the Atlantic. It endures the storms, the doldrums, and the terror of the unknown alongside the human crew. And when Columbus and his men finally make landfall in the Americas, the cat steps ashore with them. It is an alien here, a creature from another hemisphere. But it is not the only alien. The European black rat and, later, the more aggressive brown rat are also disembarking from these ships, and they find a world with few natural predators, a paradise where their populations can explode. Just as they did in the first Neolithic villages, humans have brought their pest problem with them. And so, they also bring the solution. The story repeats itself with every new voyage of discovery. Cats are on the ships of Magellan as he circumnavigates the globe. A cat is a passenger on the Mayflower in 1620, arriving in North America with the Pilgrims, its descendants spreading out across the new continent. Captain Cook carries them to Australia and New Zealand. They are introduced to islands all over the world, always for the same reason: to control the rats that came ashore from the very same ships. It's a classic example of what ecologists call an introduced species brought in to combat another introduced species. By the 18th century, the process is complete. This small feline, whose ancestral homeland was a tiny patch of desert and scrubland in the Near East, has now colonized the entire planet. Its diaspora has perfectly mirrored the human diaspora. specifically the expansion of European empires. It has a paw-hold on every continent except icy Antarctica. It has achieved a truly global distribution, a biological success story on par with that of humanity itself, and the rat. The cat has not just found a niche in our homes, it has used our own ambition and restlessness to conquer the world. Its quiet, patient, 10,000-year-long journey is finally, geographically, complete. Now, the final transformation in our relationship can begin. The cat has conquered the physical world, but its final and most important transformation is a conquest of the human mind. To see this happen, you must enter the 18th century. You are in a London coffee house, the air buzzing with radical new ideas. This is the age of enlightenment, a time when reason, logic, scientific inquiry are championed above all else. The old, dark superstitions of the medieval world are finally being laughed out of the room. The belief in witches and demonic familiars is now seen as the relic of an ignorant past. For the cat, this is a final liberation. It is no longer a demon, but it is not yet a cherished pet. It is, in the eyes of the Enlightenment, a natural phenomenon, a perfectly constructed small predator, an object of scientific curiosity. But it is the movement that follows, the passionate and emotional wave of romanticism in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, that truly invites the cat into our hearts. The Romantics rejected what they saw as the cold, sterile logic of the Enlightenment, and instead celebrated emotion, individualism, and the wild, untamed beauty of nature. And the cat, with its independent spirit, its air of mystery, and its refusal to be fully owned or commanded, became a kind of romantic hero in miniature. It was the perfect symbol for the artist, the poet, the free thinker. The very qualities that once made it suspect, its self-sufficiency and its inscrutable nature, were now seen as virtues. You can feel this profound shift in affection in the words of the English poet Christopher Smart. From his room in a mental asylum in the 1760s, he wrote a sprawling, ecstatic poem called Jubilate Agno. Tucked within it is a long, breathtaking passage that begins, "For I will consider my cat Geoffrey." He doesn't just describe his cat, he celebrates him in a torrent of loving observation. He writes of Geoffrey's daily routine, how he worships God in his own way, how he counteracts the powers of darkness by his electrical skin, how he is a mixture of gravity and waggery, and how he can creep. It is a portrait of a cat that is deeply loved, not for its usefulness, but for its very essence, for its catness. It is perhaps the first and most beautiful expression of the modern relationship with a pet. This new sentiment is amplified by another great social change, the rise of a comfortable, urban middle class. For the first time, large numbers of people have the disposable income and the leisure time to keep an animal not for work, but for simple companionship. It's a subtle but profound shift that social historians link to the new focus on the private, domestic sphere. The home is becoming a sanctuary from the harsh industrial world, a place of emotional comfort. And the cat, with its quiet, clean, and self-sufficient nature, is the ideal companion for this new kind of domestic life. It doesn't need to be walked. It keeps itself meticulously clean, and it offers its affection on its own terms, a gentle, purring presence by the fireside. The cat's long probation is over. It has survived being worshipped as a god and persecuted as a demon. It has proven its worth as a practical partner on farms and on ships. Now, Finally, it is being invited inside, not because it is useful, but simply because it is loved. The stage is set for the final act of its transformation, from a generic mouser into a pedigreed object of beauty and a cherished member of the family. The love for the cat as a companion has been firmly established, a quiet revolution in the fireside parlors of the 19th century. But now, you are about to witness the moment this private affection becomes a public spectacle, the moment the cat is officially transformed from a simple pet into a work of art. You are in London, in the year 1871. You make your way to a breathtaking structure of glass and iron that glitters in the sun. The Crystal Palace, a monument to Victorian ingenuity and the wonders of the modern world. Inside, a new and curious event is taking place, organized by an artist and cat enthusiast named Harrison Weir. Weir was a passionate admirer of the domestic cat, and he was frustrated that while dogs, pigeons, and poultry had their own competitive shows and breeding societies, the cat was still largely overlooked. He decided to change that. He organized the world's first major formal cat show. The scene inside is a marvel of Victorian organization and social buzz. Hundreds of cats are on display, each in its own cage, meticulously categorized and arranged. The air is filled with a cacophony of meows and the excited chatter of London society, who have turned out in droves. This is a major event. But the most revolutionary thing about this show is the criteria for judgment. For the first time in its 10,000-year history with us, the cat is not being judged on its ability to catch mice. It is being judged on its beauty. Judges in fine suits walk the rows, carefully considering each cat based on a written standard of points that Weir himself has drawn up. They are looking at the shape of the head, the color of the eyes, the length and texture of the fur, and the clarity of its markings. A cat's worth is no longer in its actions, but in its aesthetics. You see cats of all kinds. There are sturdy British Shorthairs, fluffy Angoras and Persians that were exotic imports from the East, and a pair of recently imported Siamese cats, described in one newspaper report as an unnatural nightmare kind of cat, for their strange pointed coats and startling blue eyes. It was a moment, as cultural historians note, where the cat was officially reclassified. It was moved from the category of a simple, useful animal to that of a luxury good, a status symbol, an object of connoisseurship. This single event ignites a worldwide phenomenon. It is the birth of the cat fancy, the formal organized hobby of breeding and exhibiting cats. The idea of a breed is now firmly established. No longer is a cat just a cat. It is a Persian, a Siamese, an Angora, a Manx. This has a profound and immediate effect on the cats themselves. The process of selective breeding, which for millennia had been a gentle, almost unconscious pressure, now becomes a deliberate and highly focused effort. Humans begin to actively select for specific, often rare, genetic mutations. Long hair, which was once a random occurrence, is now a desirable trait to be cultivated. A particular eye color or coat pattern becomes a prized feature. We are no longer just letting cats evolve alongside us. We are now actively taking the reins, shaping their evolution to suit our own aesthetic tastes. The generic village cat is on its way to becoming a living work of art, with a pedigree and a price tag to match. The cat show at the Crystal Palace was like a starting pistol for a new kind of evolution, an evolution driven not by natural survival, but by human desire. You are now looking at the cat not just as an animal, but as a living genetic blueprint, a canvas that breeders would now begin to paint with purpose. This explosion of new breeds was made possible by the rich tapestry of rare, recessive genes that had been quietly carried, mostly unseen, in the cat's DNA for thousands of years. In the wild, uniformity is often a survival advantage. The wildcat's mackerel tabby coat is a masterpiece of camouflage, and any major deviation from it would likely make an individual more visible to predators or prey. But in the safety of a human home, these rules no longer apply. A rare mutation is no longer a liability. It can become a celebrated feature. Consider the gene for long hair. This is a simple recessive trait. That means a cat needs to inherit the gene from both its mother and its father for its fur to grow long. For millennia, a long-haired cat might pop up now and then, but the trait would remain rare. In many climates, a long, thick coat could be a disadvantage, prone to matting and collecting burrs. But Victorian breeders in England, admiring the exotic Angora and Persian cats imported from the colder climates of Turkey and Iran, saw this trait as beautiful. They began to specifically breed long-haired cats with other long-haired cats, guaranteeing that all the kittens would carry the trait. And so, the majestic flowing coat of the Persian was born from a once rare mutation. You see the same story with coat color. The striking pattern of the Siamese cat, with its dark points on the ears, face, paws, and tail, is the result of a fascinating form of temperature-sensitive albinism. The gene responsible produces the dark melanin pigment only in the coolest parts of the cat's body. A Siamese kitten is born completely white and only develops its points as it grows. This was a rare mutation that originated in Southeast Asia, but once it was seen and admired by breeders, it was carefully preserved and refined. Even the familiar ginger or orange cat tells a fascinating genetic tale. The gene for orange fur is carried on the X chromosome, making it a sex-linked trait. This is why a majority of ginger cats, around 80%, are male. A male only needs one copy of the orange gene on his single X chromosome to be ginger, while a female needs to inherit it on both of her X chromosomes, a much rarer statistical event. Geneticists are still uncovering the complex interplay of all these genes, but these basic principles allowed breeders to begin mixing and matching traits with a new sense of predictability. The old blotched tabby pattern, which you saw emerge in the first Neolithic villages, was a passive marker of domestication, a trait that survived because it was no longer a disadvantage. But these new traits were being actively and intentionally amplified. Solid black, once a symbol of demonic evil, was now the basis for the sleek and elegant Bombay breed. Blue-gray fur, once a simple dilution of black, became the hallmark of the Russian blue or the British shorthair. The cat, which for most of its history had been a fairly uniform-looking animal, was now undergoing its own Cambrian explosion, a sudden diversification into a rainbow of different shapes, colors, and sizes, all orchestrated by the guiding hand of the human cat fancy. The rise of the cat fancy and the creation of breeds cemented the cat's status as a creature of beauty and value. But for the average person, one significant practical barrier still remained, keeping the cat tethered to the outdoors. For most of history, if a cat needed to relieve itself, it went outside. The alternative was a pan of sand or ash in the house, a solution that was messy, smelly, and generally unpleasant. This simple logistical problem was the last thing keeping the cat from becoming a full-time, indoor-only companion. The solution, when it came, was not born of high science or noble breeding, but of simple American post-war ingenuity. You are in the small town of Cassopolis, Michigan, in the winter of 1947. A man named Ed Lowe is helping out his neighbor. Her outdoor sand pile for her cat is frozen solid, and she's complaining about the mess of using ashes in the house. Ed works for his father's company, which sells sand, sawdust, and a type of absorbent clay called Fuller's Earth, which was used in factories to soak up grease and oil spills. On a whim, Ed suggests his neighbor try a bag of the clay. A few days later, she comes back, raving about it. The clay was far more absorbent than sand, and it did a much better job of controlling the odor. An idea was born. Ed Lowe saw the potential. He filled 10 paper bags with the clay, hand-wrote the words kitty litter on them, and tried to sell them to a local pet store. The store owner initially laughed at him, saying no one would pay for what was essentially dirt. Undeterred, Ed gave the bags away for free, confident the product would sell itself. It did. Soon, people were coming back and asking for kitty litter by name. This one, simple invention, was a complete game changer. The absorbent properties of the clay, and later clumping bentonite clay, solved the single biggest, messiest, and smelliest problem of keeping a cat indoors. This innovation was paired with another crucial development: the rise of commercially produced, sterilized cat food. Before this, feeding a cat meant giving it table scraps or raw meat, which could be messy and spoil quickly. The advent of canned food and later dry kibble made feeding a cat clean, convenient, and scientifically balanced. It's what sociologists of consumer culture call a convenience revolution. These two products didn't just make life easier, they fundamentally changed the nature of pet ownership. Together, kitty litter and modern cat food broke the last chains tying the cat to the outdoors. There was no longer any practical reason for a cat to ever leave the house. It could eat, drink, and relieve itself in a clean, convenient, and odor-free way, all within the four walls of a home. This completed the cat's 10,000-year-long journey. It started as a wild hunter on the periphery of a Neolithic campsite. It became a semi-wild resident of the village, a sacred animal in the temple, a working-class mouser on a ship, and a pedigreed beauty in a show hall. Now, thanks to these humble mid-20th century inventions, its final transformation is complete. The cat has moved from the barn to the living room, from the hearth to the sofa, and more often than not, to a prime spot right on its owner's bed. Its journey to the very center of our domestic world is finally over. The cat is now a permanent resident in your home, its physical journey complete. But its evolutionary journey with you continues, and the most compelling evidence is in the very sounds it makes. You have spent this entire journey observing the cat from the outside. Now, in these final moments, you will listen closely and decode the two most iconic sounds it makes. Sounds that reveal the true depth of your 10,000-year-long partnership. First, you hear a low, vibrating rumble as your cat settles on your lap. It is the purr. For centuries, this sound was a complete mystery. The exact mechanism of the purr is still a subject of some scientific debate, but the leading theory is that it's generated by a neural oscillator deep in the cat's brain. This oscillator sends rhythmic signals to the muscles of the larynx, or voice box, causing them to vibrate at a very specific frequency, between 25 and 150 hertz, as the cat breathes in and out. The result is that familiar hypnotic thrum. We have always associated the purr with contentment, and it certainly is a sign of a happy, relaxed cat. But modern science has revealed it is far more complex. Cats also purr when they are in great pain, when they are injured, and even when they are dying. This has led researchers to believe that the purr is also a powerful mechanism for self-soothing and healing. The low-frequency vibrations of the purr are within a therapeutic range that has been shown in other studies to help reduce pain, mend broken bones, and heal tissue. It's a kind of internal sonic medicine. Some researchers have even identified a specific solicitation purr that cats use when they want something, like food. They embed a high-frequency cry, very similar in pitch to a human baby's cry, within the low rumble of the purr, a sound that our brains are hardwired to find urgent and impossible to ignore. Even more remarkable is the second sound, the meow. You hear it as the cat approaches its food bowl, a clear, questioning vocalization directed right at you. Here is the stunning truth that ethologists, scientists who study animal behavior, have discovered. Adult cats almost never meow at each other. In the wild, kittens meow to get their mother's attention, but once they grow up, this vocalization all but disappears from their vocabulary with other cats. The adult meow, in all its varied forms, is a language that cats have developed, or at least retained, almost exclusively for communicating with one species, us. Over thousands of years of living with humans, the cat has learned that we are not very good at reading its subtle body language or scent markings. But we are highly responsive to vocal cues, particularly those that sound like the cries of our own young. The meow is the cat's brilliant evolutionary workaround. It is hijacking our own parental caregiving instincts. The cat has learned that a specific sound elicits a specific response from the large, powerful, can-opening ape it lives with. It is, in essence, speaking a language that it knows you will understand. It is the ultimate testament to its domestication, a vocal sign of a bond that has been forged and refined, generation by generation, over 10 millennia. The cat is talking to you, and it is a conversation that began a very, very long time ago. Your 10,000-year journey is over. You are back in the present day, in your own home. You look at the cat sleeping peacefully in a patch of sun on the floor. It is a creature of immense comfort, a familiar and beloved presence. You have seen its entire history, the wild hunter, the divine protector, the demonized outcast, the cherished companion. You have invited this perfect predator into the very heart of your life. But now, in this final chapter, you must confront the difficult and paradoxical consequence of its incredible success. This story of a quiet conquest, of a creature that used our own civilization to spread across the globe, has a challenging modern postscript. The very traits that made the cat so valuable to us, its self-sufficiency, its adaptability, and its peerless hunting instinct, have a dark side in the modern world. Inside your home, the cat is a pet, but the moment it steps outside, it becomes something else entirely. In nearly every ecosystem it has been introduced to, the domestic cat is a non-native invasive predator. You followed the cat as it was carried by ship to the Americas, to Australia, to islands all over the world. These were lands that had evolved for millennia without a predator of its specific type. The native birds, reptiles, and small mammals in these places had no evolved defenses against such a silent, efficient, and relentless hunter. The cat's ancient contract with us was to kill the rats and mice that followed our crops. But its hunting instinct does not differentiate. It will hunt whether it is hungry or not, driven by the same deep-seated impulse that you saw in that first Neolithic granary. The ecological data is staggering and sobering. In Australia, a continent where cats are an alien species, they have been a primary driver in the extinction of dozens of native mammal species. In the United States alone, scientific studies estimate that free-ranging domestic cats kill billions of birds and mammals every single year. For island ecosystems, the impact is even more devastating. A single cat introduced to a small island can wipe out an entire species of ground-nesting seabird that has never before had to face a land-based predator. This has created one of the most difficult and emotionally charged conservation dilemmas of our time. It's a complex and often emotional issue that pits conservationists who see the devastating impact on wildlife against animal welfare advocates who fight to protect the lives of feral and free-roaming cats. There are no easy answers. The cat is not evil. It is simply doing what 10 million years of evolution have programmed it to do. It is being a cat. The problem is not with its nature, but with its location. We are the ones who fell in love with a perfect predator, and then, in our own global expansion, we carried it with us and unleashed it upon ecosystems that were utterly unprepared. The cat's world domination, a success story we have followed for this entire journey, has come at a significant cost to the planet's biodiversity. This is the difficult, unresolved, and challenging final chapter of our long and complicated relationship. You have traveled 10,000 years in a single night. You have walked with a creature of perfect, solitary grace as it stepped out of the wild grasslands and into the heart of our world. You saw it strike an unspoken bargain in the shadow of the first granaries, a simple contract of convenience that blossomed into something far more profound. You stood by its side in a grave on Cyprus, a silent testament to a love that predates history. You watched it be elevated to a god in the sun-drenched temples of Egypt, then condemned as a demon in the terrified alleys of medieval Europe. You sailed with it on the ships that connected and conquered the world, and you saw it, finally, fully, invited into our homes, not for its utility, but for the quiet comfort of its presence. This entire sprawling story is the tale of a unique partnership. The cat is not our creation. Unlike the dog, which we have molded and twisted into 1,000 different forms to suit our needs, the cat has remained stubbornly, magnificently itself. It is a wild animal that has consented to live with us, a tenant in our homes that pays its rent in purrs and quiet companionship. It is a predator that has allowed itself to be tamed, but never truly subdued. The ghost of the wildcat you met at the very beginning of this journey still lives and breathes in the animal sleeping in your house. It is a relationship built not on mastery, but on a delicate, long-standing, and mutual truce. We provide a world of warmth, safety, and easy food. And in return, this small, independent piece of the wild has chosen to grace us with its presence, a constant and gentle reminder of the world beyond our walls. And so, our long journey through the night comes to a soft and quiet close. The great sweep of history, with its empires and its sailing ships, its temples and its palaces, all of it now fades away, leaving only the gentle, rhythmic breathing of the sleeping creature nearby. The story that began in the moonlight of the Fertile Crescent now settles into the peaceful darkness of your own room. Feel the weight of this long history, this ancient, unbroken thread that connects your world to the world of those first farmers. The cat's purr is a quiet echo of a bargain made 10 millennia ago, a sound that has comforted humans by the firelight for countless generations. Let that gentle, vibrating sound be an anchor, a soft, steady rhythm to pace your own breathing. There is nothing more to learn tonight. There is only the simple, peaceful presence of this ancient friend, this small predator, dreaming its deep and silent dreams. The story is over, and now you can let go and drift into your own quiet sleep, feeling safe and warm and protected.